Hello, and welcome to Book Circle Presents and Join the Circus. Gus and Doug have joined the Windy City Fantasy Circus, which is currently parked at the Indiana Dunes National Park. They've gone out there to introduce themselves to all of the circus employees, all of whom are one kind of magical talent or another, as are they. They've met the wolf shaman, who does the dog act for the circus, and are now moving on. "I suppose," said Theano, "that the next logical step is through here." She led them into the cluster of vehicles ending in an ad hoc courtyard bordered by 2 trucks and 2 RVs. In it, on the sandy asphalt, a young woman was guiding 3 cats through a stage routine. All 3 were big tortoise shells, and each was standing on a bucket-sized drum, rolling it along by walking backward on top of it. The young woman herself was walking backward as she led the cats through the course she had planned for them. Behind her stood an impromptu jungle gym of PVC piping, in which a short-haired calico, a long-haired calico, a long-haired black, and a solid brown cat were climbing about in a manner more monkey-like than feline. The cat trainer looked up and registered only mild surprise, since Gus and Doug had humanized on the walk through the trucks. She was slender, her dark hair in a bob, and she scanned the 2 curiously. "Felicity," said Theano, "these are the 2 new guys we sent word about, Gus Weisskopf and Doug Chiang. Guys, this is Felicity Whittington." As Doug shook her hand, he asked, "Of the London Whittingtons?" "Quite right," she answered in a British accent, "practicing the family trade." "But you're a long way from home," Gus remarked. She shrugged. "Not all of us stay in London, though the family doesn't like to talk about it. When I go home, they act as if I was never away." "But isn't your magic tied to London?" asked Doug. "There are 3 family magics, London, bells, and cats, but you probably knew that since you seem very well informed. I'm perfectly happy with cats," she gestured at her clouder, "and bells are okay, but I got bored staying in London. I like some kind of internal exile. But it's a long story. What's yours?" The 2 did their glance trade, in which Doug handed the explanation duty to Gus, while his friend related their story in the short form they had used for Theano and Rook. Doug crouched down and held out his hands to a big black and brown tabby Tom, who was strolling over with clear intent to investigate. The Tom sniffed Doug's fingers, then looked him in the face. Doug gave the slow blink that is a feline's smile. The cat moved in for scritches. Doug was aware of Whittington's gaze on him. Shortly, Gus reached the point in the story where they demonstrated their alternate shapes. Still crouched, Doug saw his friend's foot enlarge and grow scaly. He rose with the cat, which made no objection. For the sake of his passenger, he turned as slowly as possible. The cat took no notice. Whittington did. She stared at their changes, but showed less surprise than had John's. Not all the other cats took it as easily as Doug's guessed. One jumped from the rolling barrel and ran off, as did a couple of bystanders. One of the gymnasts dropped off and crouched, staring. "So what kind of fae are you?" she asked. "As far as we know," said Gus, "this shape was made up by a shapecaster working for the fae who kidnapped us." "We call it a lungmao, dragon cat," said Doug, "but that's just to have a word for it. Who's this, by the way?" He petted the cat in his arms, who was now purring. Whittington said, "I think your shapes might qualify as a rheostrad, a warp spasm, a special battle form. The word's from Gaelic. And that's Bomber you're holding. Here, toss him to me." "Toss?" asked Doug. "Yeah, just give him a little bounce once or twice to let him know what's coming, then toss." Doug obeyed. When he jogged Bomber in his arms in preparation, the cat perked up and tensed. Doug tossed, and Whittington caught. Bomber landed neatly and immediately turned around in her arms, ready for the next launch. "Here," said Whittington to Gus, and tossed. Gus caught, though not as gracefully, laughed, turned, and tossed to Doug. After 3 circuits, Whittington put the cat down. He sat at her feet and stared at the newcomers some more. He's one of my attack cats, she said, but he knows when we're just practicing, playing. Lung Mao faces register surprise even better than human ones do. It's the expressive ears. She laughed. It's very effective, especially as a surprise attack, which it usually is. I expect, agreed Doug. Holy crow, I bet, said Gus. He lands scratching, right? And yelling and biting if opportunity presents itself. Then he leaps off and runs away. You two ought to have a pretty good surprise factor, too. Gus nodded. As in, what the hell is that? Yes, but also the changing itself. Can you change fast enough to do it in the middle of a fight? Beat. Their gi jackets fluttered down onto their human shoulders. Right. Well, welcome aboard. They met the acrobats en masse. They were practicing on the safety net, using it as a trampoline. In the course of nature, the net did not have enough bounce for that, but that was only the course of nature. Loopers, said Gus, watching two slim figures join hands in midair, then twirl heads over heels for rather too long. Wind mages. Two more figures climbed into the net and began bouncing, working up improbable amounts of altitude. All four wore costumes with bold black and white diamond patterns. Quite right, said Rook, showing up next to Theano. This is the first half of practice. They keep their levitation skills up. In the second half, they run through their show routine and practice not using too much levitation so as to look merely spectacular, not unbelievable. A fifth figure jumped into the net. She performed 5 bounces, each accompanied by pointed toes and arched back, and was by then on a level with the pair that was currently highest. They were doing a mid-air do-si-do, but opened it up to let her in. The 3 dove into the net together and somehow concentrated their joint energy into the newcomer, who went rocketing up. Holy crow, exclaimed Gus. That looks plenty dangerous even with the net. And, said Doug, she's no looper. At least she's not levitating. Quite right, said Rook. She's just running on muscle and nerve. A lot of nerve. No magic. With the non-loopers' arrival, the team shifted into the second half of practice, the rehearsal of their show. The 4 on the ground watched respectfully. At length, as it started to wind down, Doug said, She's showing them up, the non-looper. She's good, really good. You see her next to them and you can tell there's some trick keeping them up. You see her and you can tell the loopers aren't doing it for real. That's a bit of a problem, muttered Rook. On performances, there's a framework for trapezes, and people can suppose there are wires leading up to it. It annoys the loopers to hide their lights under the bushels that way, but it is a cover-up after all. The acrobats were climbing out of the net now. The non-looper star walked up to them while the loopers watched in the middle distance. The checkerboard costume included a tight hood over the head. This she pulled back to towel the sweat out of her hair, which was black. She was Hispanic and looked like a gymnast, short but tautly athletic. She glanced at Rook and Theano, but addressed herself directly to Gus and Doug. Hello there, she held out a hand. Estebana Herrera. Call me Bana, but not Banana. She flashed a grin. Doug shook her hand and replied, Doug Chiang. August Weisskopf, said Gus. Call me Gus. Right, she looked over their martial arts robes. So, Chopmeisters, you here to be karate-kicking monster hunters? They drew themselves up and changed. Hunter monsters, Gus replied. She laughed. Wow, so what are you, ogres, trolls? No more than you're a banana, said Gus with a grin that might have been genial if you got used to all the teeth. Ah, point taken. So what do you want to be called? Gus, Doug. She nodded and finally turned to Rook and Theano. Good timing, she said. So, you got the memo? What do you mean? Asked Theano. You didn't get the warning? Bana asked back. I thought you'd finally given up your silly rule about foretelling for us. We have not, Rook answered coldly. What you foresee you cannot change. he added in a sing-song tone of one tired of repeating themselves. We're not going to... Banna put her hands on her hips and spat a word they don't teach you in high school Spanish. You're tripping around in the dark when you don't have to. Unless we weren't, exclaimed Theano, ignoring the argument. Dennis, you were so eager to hire them. Could you have subconsciously... Oh, perhaps, snapped Rook. But that's not foretelling. Whoa, 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 interrupted Gus, holding up his hands. Back up. Warning about what? There's an attack coming, said Banna. Rook snorted. Again, we make enemies. We're always being attacked. Be specific. Banna rapped. Soon. Bad. That's not specific. It's what I got. It's better than the nothing you got. No, it's not. We run the watches. We set security. If all you can say is danger soon, you might as well... I was right about the guy in Columbus. I was right about the Coven in Indianapolis. I was right about that thing in Wisconsin. Of course you were. A stopped clock is right twice a day. If you always say it's dangerous, you'll be right when it's dangerous. Doug made the timeout sign and said, Hold it. He turned to Banna. Look, we're being introduced around. So far, we've met the numerologist, the chess mage, the werewolf, the cat lady, the loopers, kinda, and you. And we've been told everyone's tricks except for you. What's your trick? How do you come by these premonitions? Banna shrugged and got as far as, when Rook interrupted, she's a sensitive, a receptant, or hedge wizard, or intuitive. There are lots of names. It means Banna took the conversation back. I get hunches, good hunches. But this guy, no, I haven't filled out the forms, so it doesn't count. I can't add it up in columns of numbers like her. She nodded at Theano, who looked offended at being dragged into the fight. So it doesn't count. You don't check sources. You have no sources. You don't try other approaches and compare because there's no approach. You don't check contrary angles because there's no angle. I don't need your damn bookkeeping, old man. I just know. You don't know, you suspect. All the time. When... Pipe down, barked Captain Chiang. He folded his arms behind his back and lashed his tail. Before the short, startled silence could end, he said in a tone of deliberate detachment, We appear to have what's called creative differences here. He stared into space and quoted, I see what you are. You are a little peddling magician who works by rules and books. There is no real magic in your blood and heart. Your kind was made an end of in my world 1,000 years ago. Jadis, the future White Witch of Narnia, to Uncle Andrew in The Magician's Nephew. Is that about the size of your estimation of Professor Rook? He asked Banna. He's a chess mage, she grumbled. Everything's on a grid for him. I'll take that as a yes, said Doug. It's an unfair characterization, Rook protested. Chess is my ruling metaphor, but I still understand the uses of intuition. Chess requires it. But intuition needs to be more than a gust of anxiety. We asked you 2 or 3 times how things stood, how they ran in your circus, Doug remarked. And you said, oh, come see for yourselves. Well, now we're seeing. At our first interview, Rook, you wound up needing us more than we needed you. Convince us we should go through with this. Rook looked stricken, Banna seething, Theano fretful. How long have you goobers been at this? Gus asked. The circus is about 6 years old, Rook answered. And you're not all dead, Gus observed. I joined about 7 months ago, Banna said. And you're still here. So it looks like the circus must be doing something right, and you must make some contribution to that, not just excellent acrobatics and false positives. What is it? You a fighter? Use your receptance as a tracker? What? Banna folded her arms and smiled. Both of those, but mainly I'm a vampire, a recovering vampire. Huh. Well, that sounds impressive. I'll ask you what you mean by it later. Gus looked over Banna's shoulder, where the loopers stood watching, joined by some other folks, variously talking and smiling among themselves. Placing bets, he wouldn't be surprised. Meantime, it looks like to me you two must enjoy your arguing, so we'll leave you to it, and maybe Madame Theano will show us around some more." He met her eye. She smiled and headed off, shooting looks at her husband and Banna in passing. Gus and Doug fell in behind her. "So you like animals?" said Theano. Doug chuckled. "Well, look at us." "And we owe a lot to people who are dogs and horses," added Gus. Theano tucked that remark away for future consideration and replied, "Well, we have 3 horses who belong to the trickshot and lariat folk, if you'd like to see them next. You said you ride?" "Just a little," said Gus. "The Grand Normans gave us some beginner lessons. Some of them are really into horses." "Waist deep," Gus muttered. "Normally," Doug went on, "horses don't care for us. They're very cautious animals and know freaky when they see it." He shrank into human form. "Maybe we should ask their owners about doing the big reveal in front of the horses." "So what's this about Banna being a vampire?" Gus asked Theano. "What do you know about vampirism?" she asked back. "Not a lot," he admitted. "We're stronger on fays, wizards, and ghosts." She watched him from the corner of her eye as, over a couple of paces, he too shrank back down to human. She looked about. They were in a little alley walled with truck bodies. No one was around to have seen the changes. Was she, in fact, safe with these guys? Things? She had 4 extremities, and they, when Lungmao, catmen, had 5 each, for a total of 14, the number of the helpers. Now, tails gone, the total was 12, the number of the complete community. She sounded those numbers in her mind on the alert for false notes, but heard none. Nor were there any warning notes in the boys' voices. As a Pythagorean, she did magic mostly through number and music, sound. All through the trip out from Chicago, she had listened for false notes in their voices, but heard only candor. Now she heard only curiosity and understandable annoyance over her husband and Banna. She had been silent a little too long. "Vampirism?" Doug prompted. "She doesn't look dead," Gus said. "Of course, we don't look like fairies." "She isn't dead. There are many kinds, many strains of vampirism. Some vampires are alive, others are ghosts or undead corpses. Some are obligate, some are facultative. Some got it through a curse, others by deliberate training. What they can all do is rob people of power, chi, prana." They nodded. "We did that with ghosts," Gus said. "Greathouse told us how to. Is that vampirism?" Theano waved a dismissive hand. "Anyone can do ghosts once they know it can be done. There's nothing in the way. And it's only a little harder to move power between 2 willing subjects. Vampires are rougher. They don't just move power. If they try harder, longer, they can rob you of power-generating capacity, like sucking out marrow as well as blood. That can kill you quickly." "But Banna is reformed?" asked Doug. "Yes, she's alive, learned the skill deliberately, and pulls power through breath, body heat, or touch. Very versatile, but no blood drinking." "And you believe her," said Doug. "Yes." She had listened long and hard to Banna's voice for truth. "Did she ever kill anyone?" "Once, in self-defense, perhaps. She doesn't know the outcome. And here are the horses." They met with the 3 women and the man who owned the horses and did trick shots and lariat tricks. "Yeah, don't do that change in front of the horses until they get to know you, in both shapes." They met the clowns, more like roving jesters, who blended in with the acrobats who weren't loopers and spiced up their acts with repartee and stage magic. "Rook doesn't mind you doing magic?" "Mind? We taught him." They met the alchemist, who had no act but worked invaluably behind the scenes. "Either of you cook?" "Cook?" "They all seem to think the alchemist should be the cook, but I'm a metallurgist." "Oh, either of us can cook for 1 with a microwave or for 20 with a campfire." "Outstanding." They met the little chorus of singers. "Why don't your voices change when your size and faces do?" "We never thought about that before." They ended the day on bedrolls in the back of a truck trailer with the promise of better accommodations tomorrow night. Not that they would use tonight's. Doug lay back on his bedroll and puffed out a sigh. "I haven't done so much changing since Greathouse taught us how." Gus nodded. Up, down, cat man, cat man." It was a strange kind of fatigue, not in the least physical. All they had done was stroll around the parking lot all day, nor mental in the way of someone who had spent the day concentrating in hard thought. But tired they were. "It's like writer's block," said Doug. "Like I'm out of ideas. Ideas about my shape, anyway. As if each change was a creative act, and I just don't..." He waved his hand vaguely. "Yeah, okay," agreed Gus just as vaguely. "I guess we're out of chi. I suppose sleep will tank us up," he added doubtfully. "No way I can sleep." "Yeah, we just spend the night back in the mountains." Without more discussion, they opened the back of the truck and stepped out. Their trailer backed onto the edge of the parking lot. A few paces took them onto sand and into dune grass. Lake Michigan rolled a few yards away. To the left, lights from Gary and Chicago reflected off clouds. "We on patrol?" Gus asked. "Guess so," Doug answered. "In which case, one more time." He had been human. He was now Lung Mao. Gus sighed noisily and followed. Now, to their feline eyes, the night was hardly dimmer than an overcast day. The lake waves were louder, but they could also hear the murmur of late conversations in the circus camp. Their whiskers told them exactly which way the breeze blew. The chill did not bite. They strolled down to the waterline. "When I was a kid," said Gus, "I used to wish the lake had seashells." "I used to wish the white kids would play with us," said Doug. Sometimes they did, he added when he saw Gus's head droop. "We'd come in a big bunch with all my cousins. The golden horde was probably intimidating." Gus snorted softly to acknowledge the little joke and turned, leading the way back to the parking lot. "Perimeter?" he asked. "Sure, but if we're on patrol, let's go back and get our swords and stuff." As they re-emerged from the truck trailer, buckling their sword belts, a pale shape padded out of the truck cluster. It was one of the large poodles. "Fellow patrolman, I guess," said Doug. "Hi, guy." "Hi, buddy," Gus echoed, but the dog was on duty, not looking for company. It looked them over with an expression suggesting it wanted to see their papers. "Would it help if we changed back?" asked Doug. Don't think so. Probably more help to roll over and show our tummies." The dog raised its head and made a soft noise, a little bit whine, a little bit howl. Immediately, an even bigger canine walked out of shadows that could not have contained it. A wolf, wavering between gray and translucent, came up beside the dog and made a soft, comfortable growl. The dog relaxed a bit. "Good evening, Mr. Johns," said Doug. "Evening," returned the wolf in John's voice. "He's just not sure about you yet." They nodded. "Sure, of course." The wolf gave a grunt, and the dog trotted off without a backward look. The wolf reared up and became the human version of Johns in a nondescript pale gray version of the clothes they had seen him in last time. "They put you on patrol your first night? Seems inhospitable." "Our own idea," Gus answered. "Can't sleep tonight." Johns nodded and looked them over. "Swords?" "We own rifles and revolvers," said Doug, "but we're out of ammo, and anyway, there's the legalities. Are swords enough?" Johns nodded. "Commonest is a cop or a watchman showing up. Then you stay out of sight and alert Rook to do any fast talking. Next is thieves figuring us for easy marks, usually mundane. You might want to think about looking like that, or talk to Rook." They nodded, but made no move to change back. "So we don't get many sundered troublemakers?" Gus asked. Johns chuckled, and his face briefly pulled out into a grinning wolf mask. "We go after them," he answered, "not them after us. Sometimes they come back for 2 or 3 more rounds, but I can't think of any outstanding grudges just now." "Vanna seems worried," Gus remarked. "She always worries. She does have some precog. She can dodge all day, but at longer range it's just always on. I suppose there's always a next danger, and she feels that. Or she's just a worrier." "Well," said Doug, "since we're here and available and you're the senior watchman, how do you want to use us?" Johns shrugged, and in the act melted back into wolf. "Suit yourselves. Julia and Sal are out and about just now. So's Jude. You've met them?" "Dunno," said Gus. "Can't remember," said Doug. "If they run screaming at the sight of us, I guess not." The wolf chuckled as he prowled back into the shadows and faded. The two started their first circuit around the perimeter. It wasn't a long perimeter, or an interesting one. After the 4th round, they widened their scope and wandered up into the lakeward dunes on one side of the camp, then skirted the trees on the other. The steady breeze from the lake was stirred around here at the edge of the trees. Still, their whiskers picked up an approach, and they were starting to turn when a cold hand grabbed each of them by the neck. And we'll find out what that's about next time.